So welcome to Life of Riley's July 2024 webinar. Today we'll be talking about the practice of breeding dogs and selling puppies for profit in urban communities, particularly economically marginalized urban communities. So right now, we all know that animal shelters and communities across the country are past full. I think it's just a sign of our times. We unfortunately do not live in a society where all people are set up to thrive or even have their basic needs met, and relinquishing or abandoning a pet is just a sign of the distress a lot of people are experiencing right now. But I have to say, I'm feeling pretty good about the way our animal welfare movement is handling this right now, despite the fact that you all are caught in the middle of this fire. Dogs coming at you from every different direction, dealing with the stressed community members who are abandoning those dogs. And some of you even have to make really hard decisions about euthanasia, partly because of space issues. And despite all of this, I don't hear a lot of judgment coming from our sector these days. I don't hear people saying, oh, those horrible people abandoning their dogs, or they shouldn't have gotten a dog if they couldn't afford it. I'm not hearing that anymore. I hear leaders in our movement talking about the challenges people are facing in keeping their pets, and I see all of you stepping into your communities to advocate for more pet-friendly, affordable housing, making sure pet food is available at food pantries, trying to make veterinary care affordable, offering safety net foster programs, and at least starting to have conversations about systemic racism and some of the deep-rooted inequities that make it harder for some people to keep their pets. This is the same compassion and understanding and thoughtfulness that we need to bring to some of the conversations on dog breeding. People breed dogs for many different reasons, sometimes on purpose, sometimes on accident, and unfortunately, sometimes in poor animal welfare standards. Sometimes people are breeding pit bull type dogs in the same neighborhoods where the local shelter is overflowing with pit bull type dogs. And that can be frustrating, especially if those dogs are ending up in our shelters. So we need to address it, but we need to first understand the social and economic factors driving this practice. And we need to allow ourselves to be guided by the local community leaders, the people who are closest to that issue as we seek to make things better. So it is my honor to introduce Tim Freeman, founder and CEO of Braveheart Pets, Inc. in Atlanta. A talented dog trainer and natural leader with a deep love for his community members and their pets, Tim will discuss the drivers of dog breeding in economically disenfranchised urban communities and the best ways to engage communities in solutions to unchecked dog breeding. Given his own proximity to the issue and the trusting relationships he has built with his community, Tim is uniquely positioned to advise the animal welfare sector on the problem of dog breeding in urban areas. So Tim, we are so grateful to have you with us. In a moment, you're all going to hear a pre-recorded conversation between myself and Tim, but don't worry, Tim is also here live and in real time. So after the recording, you'll have the opportunity to ask Tim questions directly. And so while we'll do questions at the end, feel free to type in questions to the chat at any time. We'll be watching the chat and reading out questions at the end of the recording. And of course, there'll also be an opportunity for you to unmute and ask your question at the end of the recording. Thank you so much for being here. I've learned so much from you and from the work of Braveheart Pets over the past few years. And you're always making me think about how I can do my job better. And as you know, part of my job is to find and support ways to end the breeding of dogs, especially since we have too many dogs in shelters, and then to make sure that when dogs are bred, they're bred with the highest level of care. And a lot of our grantee partners are really focused on large commercial breeding facilities or breeding facilities in rural areas. But you and I know that a lot of dogs are bred in urban areas like Philly, where I live, in Atlanta, where you live. But I don't think a lot of us know how to think about or how to begin to approach addressing dog breeding not accidental litters necessarily, but dog breeding for money in urban areas. So I thought you'd be the best person to get us started off on that conversation. So thanks for being here. And I'm gonna start asking you lots of questions, but before I do that, I thought maybe you could set the context for us a little bit and tell us a little bit about your community where you work and also about your work and your role in that community, just to start us off, and then I'll dive in with some questions. Is that okay?
Okay, sure. Well, thank you guys first for having me. My name is Tim Freeman. You mentioned that. I run an organization in Atlanta called Braveheart Pets. And generally speaking, I use my pet training and dog training capabilities to talk and deal with the pet caregivers on many, many different levels. And of course, one of the biggest concerns is overpopulation of pets. And actually, I try not to use that word, especially in my presentation to the people, and I'll explain why later. But that is the issue, and the ultimate end game is a lot of unnecessary euthanization, and that's really what bothers me the most about it. So I've been dealing with this issue for quite some time, and the things that I've learned most of all that this is a journey and probably an ongoing journey, the kind where you have some successes, but not always successes. So you just have to keep on pushing and really, really get to know people so that it's easier for you to talk to them about things. So, here in Atlanta, of course, it is an urban area. Um, Systemically, it kind of underserved in terms of economics, in terms of opportunities to pet healthcare, jobs, food. I mean, it's all sorts of deserts. Um, so, like Chethana was mentioning, one of the things that people in urban areas do, and most of the time it is intentional, is try to supplement their income with the breeding of dogs. And it serves two purposes in the urban areas. It also gives you an identity in your area as like a popular person. You're the dog person. So I've also had to learn how to give people, well, that's where my training skills come in, because if I can show them how to impress people with their training skills, there's less of a need for them to breed in order to be popular, to give them something else to be popular for. So I try to, and even if people, because I've worked with other people that can't offer training skills, but you have to try to offer something that replaces that need to be popular, which in our neighborhoods is always highly prevalent. So they're doing it for both the income, which is usually not that much. It's not that much money coming out of it, and that's one of the realizations that you're trying to help them come to as well. But they're also doing it for the notoriety, so that they can be popular in the neighborhood, and everybody loves, you know, dogs, particularly puppies. The evolution into the dog, coming from a puppy to a dog, is a bit harder, and that's where we have a lot of the dogs ending up in the shelter, is when they make that transition from puppy to an actual dog. So yeah, that's pretty much in a nutshell. And I've heard every reason, and that's why I'm so glad we're getting a chance to really do this, because it is integral, and it's not a one-way fix all. It is very integral. It takes a group of people that sometimes ask each other questions and bounce things off of each other, because there's no right way to do it. And there's no cookie cutter approach. It's all, more or less, for me, it's about getting to know the people and allowing them to get to know you. It's literally up to me to convince them that they can trust me, not convince them to spay and neuter or anything of that nature. From the onset, it's to convince them to trust me. And once I earn that trust, we start to move further into other areas. Where I've seen a lot of the breakdown with some groups is the pressure to make the decision, which it only really makes the people really just lie to you about certain situations, tell you what you want to hear, and nothing ever really happens. So it does take for you to get to know them.
How long does it take to earn that trust? Is that a fast process or is that a really slow process? And it's not just time. What else are you doing in your community to build that trust so you can have this conversation?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's no, it's not fast. It's never fast, and quite frankly, you don't want it to be, because I feel like if you get it done fast, you don't earn a friend, and you don't earn a trust, and you don't earn an advocate. So you rush in, maybe cut a deal for shots and spay neuter, and then you're gone. That is good, but it's not good enough because you lose that advocacy of the person that you serve, and you really want them, eventually, people in the neighborhood, to talk about what you did for them and tell other people who they can go to when they make that decision or need a little help about a variety of things. So that's the other thing that I try to do for people in my neighborhood, is be there for them on many different fronts. And that's whether it's animal welfare related or not. I like to get to know their children, find out what the basketball teams, football teams, and be there, to support. And that's why and we'll talk about this, it's always important for groups to at least collaborate with some people that live in the neighborhood. I think most people call them proximate leaders. I call them proximate partners. But you can't be everywhere at one time, and the people that live in the neighborhood are the most easily accessible, and the ones that the people in the neighborhood start to trust, as much. So like if you're leading an organization, you need to look for some people that actually live in the neighborhood that can work with you. And one thing that I've found, and this may sound a bit strange, but the people that you really want to find, you want to find people that are really good with other people. You don't want to be too concerned about them being totally in love with animals and being in the animal welfare position. What you want to do is get the people that are really great with people, because those are the ones that's going to be able to get in there, be friends with them, and then we start having those deeper conversations. I mean, even me myself, being from the hood and most people knowing me, I really can't come right in the door talking spay neuter. I I gotta gain their confidence. I can't come in the door, talking about the dog, the puppies that they have really aren't worth that much money, even though I know they're not. But I can't come in the door like that. But I will get around to it once we're friends and we're comfortable enough. Now I can breach those subjects. As like before, if you come like that, you either gonna lose their confidence or y'all gonna get in the argument about who's right and who's wrong about spay and neuter. And there may not be a total right and wrong, but what a lot of people in society don't know is actually how many animals lose their lives unnecessarily because of a misstep that we make. I guess like a lot of people look at it from a religious basis, they say that we're supposed to go forth and produce and sustain the world. But when you really get people, especially in the hoods, in the urban areas, to look at it and look at the number of euthanizations, and sometimes they have to see it, and we'll talk about that too. I like to get people to the shelter and let them realize that a large majority of these animals are going to be put to sleep, and that a large majority of it is our fault. It really is. It's something, and if it's not our fault, it's something that's within our power to minimize. So
So
yeah,
Tim,
it never takes a short period of time. No, it's a journey.
and tell me, so I'm going to ask you to back up for a minute as we were talking about your community. Tell me a little bit, because we are animal welfare people and we're really curious about people's relationships with their pets. So tell me a little bit about your community's relationship with their pets. First of all, where are most people getting their pets? Are they just buying puppies from their neighbors and other people in their neighborhood? Or are they going to shelters? Where are they getting their pets? Why do they want their pets? And tell me a little bit about their relationships with their pets, because I think sometimes for people from outside a community going into a new place that we don't know, it's really hard to know people's love languages. It's really hard to kind of understand what's going on in a relationship between people, let alone a relationship between people and animals. So what does that look like in your community?
Yeah, that's kind of a loaded question, but let's try to go over it. And once again, that's why you need people that live in the neighborhood that experience these things, because you can tell people about how how people in inner cities, particularly Black people, how they feel about pets, but I don't think anyone understands it by it being explained. You have to be either immersed in it or let someone else do it that is immersed in it. So we do love them. They are our support. They are our family. Doesn't the love doesn't look like love to everybody. Let's put it that way. And I think that's where some of the breakdown between the open animal welfare community and as it comes to people in the urban area who go through a lot of stuff every day and who have systematically been put at the bottom of the barrel for a long time. So the love is there. And that's something that I always have to believe and see it. You don't always visualize it, but it's really there. And I think people in the hood, they actually need and love their animals more than affluent people, because affluent people have more that can keep them going and keep them happy. Sometimes in this neighborhood, our dogs, our cats, our companion animals are all we have. But a lot of outside eyes looking in still don't understand the way we roll. They don't even understand, how we raise our children sometimes. So it's very important to have somebody within the neighborhood that does understand the nuances of things. But they really, um, Black people and people in the urban areas, they want either more or the same things or more things than anybody else. Love is really not the issue. The issue is knowledge, I think. The issue is knowledge and not enough people caring enough to come to them with issues like this and be what we call be real about it, you know. Just be totally real about the upsides, the downsides, and what's really going on.
The one piece I wanted you to add on to that is, where are people getting their pets?
Oh yeah, yeah. Primarily, yeah, it's all neighborhood breeding. Primarily, very very rarely do I see anyone that goes to a high price, professional breeder and purchase a dog. So it's all inside the neighborhood, mostly, family oriented. Like even to the point, like if one family member wants a dog, like say grandmama wants a dog, they won't go buy a dog. They'll get in touch with the grandson or the cousin who has a couple of dogs and tell him next time you have some puppies, I want one of your puppies. Problem being, grandma is about the only one that wants a dog, and the female dog is about to have 8 to 10 puppies. So and that's the issue, and that's part of the thing where you take them down to the shelter and introduce them to the shelter. Now, here in Atlanta, we have had an issue with the shelters not being friendly to our people and not wanting to adopt, and most of the time being outwardly rude about the fact that they don't think we're worthy. So if someone's having that problem in their city, you got to start talking to your animal shelter and try to, build some bridges with them, because once you get people to make that decision to adopt rather than have somebody to breed, the thing that used to make me the most disappointed is when I got them to that point, and then, some person at the shelter says they not qualified, so to speak. That really used to burn me up. So I did have to work on that a bit, and that'll go back and forth too, depending on who's working at the shelter, because it's not always the same person. So you do have to help in that regard too. Unfortunately, I wish we really didn't. I wish we knew that each time we were able to reach somebody and convince them that it's much better off to go down there and save an animal rather than to create 7 or 8 more. Then, but I need to know that they will be approved. So that's an issue within itself. But yeah, it's a lot of breeding like that. Um, Most of it is because somebody else in the family says that they want a dog, and some of them do actually just breed for the money itself. But most of them is because when somebody's in the neighborhood and they see you with your dog, they fall in love with your dog and they say, I want one. Next time you have puppies, let me know. And they'll transfer numbers. And, that's how it goes. And it keeps
What
going
kind
like
of
that.
dogs are these, Tim?
They're mostly always pit bull type.
Why? Why do people
Uh,
like those dogs so much?
Honestly, Chestnut, and this is maybe a controversial subject, but I think, and I've talked to people about this before too, I think the pit bull embodies what Black people have been through. I think they embody what we think we are. We're the like you can't kill us. We're tough. You've tried to. You put us through the ringer, but we are tough, and we show that toughness in kind of the same ways that the pit bulldog seems to show that tenacity. So I think we prefer the pit bulldog because it seems like he's been given a bad rap a lot of times, and that's the same bad rap we get. So we really coalesce towards that particular breed of dog. I mean, almost every single time. Like you can even take a lot of Black people to the shelter, and as they look at the dogs, they'll say things like, "I don't want that sissy looking dog," and it may be a nice German Shepherd or a nice, golden retriever, but they want that macho look. They want it. It's just the way the hood is. That's another one of those stereotypes that is a stereotype, but it comes from reality.
I
So
actually
yeah,
heard someone who breeds pit bulls, heard about them saying this, that um, they relate to the pit bull because people are afraid of them when they're walking down the street, but they don't need to be because they're so soft on the inside, and so many pit bulls are so soft on the inside. And, you know, and everything you said, that, people make judgments about them that aren't necessarily true. So they're just so relatable for being kind of tough on the outside and cuddly on the inside.
hmm and I mean, we can talk about this briefly. The part about the pit bull fighting, that used to be a big, 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 big problem. I haven't seen that being an issue, thank God, for a while. But I know that used to turn a lot of people on. But I have not seen or heard these young guys be interested. They just want the dog to look good, look tough, and kind of um, show the public what that you got a dog, you kind of tough looking, you live in a tough neighborhood, you kind of want a dog to match that bravado, and the pit bull does that for you, and
Yeah,
they're very lovable. They're
and
very
I think it's
lovable,
good
and
for
people
people
know
to
that.
remember that just because you see someone breeding pit bulls doesn't mean that he's fighting those pit bulls. He just really likes pit bulls. Um,
Yep, yep.
so
That used to be an issue, I think, and I mean, obviously, when it comes to fighting, that pit bull must be the preference. But I swear to God, I have not seen that taking place. Shoot, for years and years, maybe about 10 years or better. That's not really an issue around here anymore. Thank God. So yeah, but the over influx of pit bulls and them being euthanized like crazy in Atlanta is a real big problem, real big issue, real big.
So, Tim, I'm going to ask you another, it's a tangential question, but it's related. Is this really an animal welfare problem? Is this an economic problem? Is this an issue of if we partnered instead with organizations that were bringing more economic opportunity, more educational opportunities for young people, for all people in your communities and other communities that are breeding dogs, would this problem go away on its own? Is this an economic problem to solve, or is this an animal welfare problem to solve?
primarily it is an economic problem. Primarily because of the fact, like we talked about earlier, the people in the inner cities do love their pets. It's just systematically the way we've been put in a pressure cooker and been made to survive, not to thrive, but only to survive. We are constantly in survival mode, and it puts us in a smaller box. So yeah, if there was a lot more attention put towards other things socially, a lot of this, I don't know if I would say go away, because things, like this never go away, but the numbers would decrease so far that, yeah, I think you could consider it as not an issue anymore. I really do think that could be done, because it's that you're not dealing with bad people. You dealing with people who don't know enough and have enough other options to do anything else. And Black people are kind of used to being in that position. I mean, most Black people, and most anybody, like when you go without certain things for so long, you start to accept the fact or convince yourself that you don't want them or you don't need them. Even Black people in the hood, if you talk to them about money, I don't need any money. Money ain't the answer. We know we need money, but since we can't get it, we may as well convince ourselves that it's not needed. Spay and neuter will fall in that same category. You could show them tangibly where it is not beneficial to be breeding like this. But since they don't have anyone else talking like that, or anywhere they can take their pet to and get it spayed and neutered at a price they can afford, they start to saying they don't want it, they don't need it. So it's like a way of shielding yourself from something that you can't really afford, or that's something that's not popular in your neck of the woods. So we do need more advocates, and also there has to be either, I would prefer that Black people and people in urban areas income level would increase, so they could afford these things. I know a lot of people talk about low cost spay neuter opportunities, and I'm fine with that. But I would also like to go along with that, a rise in the incomes and the productivity of the people, so that we're no longer just talking about the animal welfare. We're talking about the people welfare as a holistic type thing, because I think most of us know, as long as the people do better, the pets will automatically do better. I think a lot of us may sidestep that and go straight for the care of the animal, but I think that's a mistake, especially in the urban areas. You really need to pay more attention to the family and the family structure, and then you'll be able to get to into the ins and the outs of how to reverse some of the thinking as it relates to how they treat their pet. But if you go straight in at the pet, you're gonna meet up with a lot of shucking and jiving, and shucking and jiving means lying to you, telling you what you want to hear temporarily, and then never following through. So yeah, I really do think it's more of a social economic issue than it is an animal welfare issue. If the social economic side was dealt with a lot more upfront, we wouldn't hardly have to put in as nowhere near as much work convincing people that this is one of the better things to do, if the social economic part was there. Yeah.
It's interesting, Tim, because when I talk to you, it's hard to separate out the different issues. It's hard to separate out the issue of dogs coming into the shelter, or people not being able to afford vet care or spay neuter for their pets, or people breeding their dogs. It all kind of seems like the same issue. And then it's tied up with these larger economic and these systemic issues. If you had, if you were to kind of chart out a plan for your community, for communities that are like yours, in order to address these companion animal welfare issues, and if you were just to advise the animal welfare community, this is how you approach communities like mine, what would your advice be? What would be the components of a plan to improve companion animal welfare?
I think the biggest part for me would be to find proximate partners in the neighborhood that actually are embedded in the neighborhood, so that they're always there for people, and kind of incentivize those proximate partners some kind of way. I don't know, some organizations have funds that they can give to people, but I think you have to find some type of incentive for them to coalesce with you and talk to the people in the neighborhood. And just remember that it's all like gaining friends and a confidence game. If the people not confident in you, like when I was going out promoting spay and neuter, when I left out, I went out promoting myself. That was the first thing I wanted to promote was Tim. Let them know who Tim is. Let them know that I got their back. I'm on their side. And then we would progress into more animal welfare issues as we got to know each other. So I would say funding is a big deal because you always need funding for when it comes down to transportation, paying for the spay neuters. But the biggest thing is to have people inside the neighborhood who understand the everyday lives of the people, not only as it relates to animal welfare, but as it relates to their conditions altogether. Once you do that and you gain that trust and that friendship, you can start talking about other issues. And you got to realize that it is a journey. Sometimes as those proximate partners, as the person that's talking to the people in the neighborhood, you're gonna be inundated with a lot of other issues, and you just got to be ready. You just got to be ready to either partner with other people and get other people to help. That's a big part of it. Knowing the neighborhood, knowing what other services are out there, because you're gonna get calls about everything, and you want the people to call you. It's like the first time they start calling you, now you know you got a friend. So if you calling them every 2 or 3 weeks, asking them what they need, that's cool. But what you want is for them to call you one day and tell you what they need. Now you know you got a friend. So we really do need approximate leaders when it comes to like the governments and stuff, municipalities and cities. I wish they would run more public awareness type commercials promoting spay and neuter more. And I wish they would do it more in the urban areas than anywhere else. But as far as like working in the inner cities, you just got to build up that teamwork and you got to be there. Somebody has to be immersed in that situation. You can't really come in and go back out and make promises and go back out. You got to live there. They got to be able to get to you in more ways than just a phone call. I mean, you really have to, become their friend. So that's I think that's the biggest part of it, knowing that it is a journey, having those proximate partners, and then y'all kind of get together sometime and practice your messaging. Your direct messaging is going to be another big deal. How do you spin this, so to speak? And I sometimes people think when you say spin it, it's like you're being fake. You're not really being fake, but you do have to become somewhat of an actor in order to achieve this goal. You have to earn the people's confidence one way or another. I don't know if that completely answered. I know that's kind of a deeper question, but yeah, you got to
No,
have
that's
that inside person is very important, and funding is important. And what I like to see in the neighborhood is when people start coming to the proximate leaders and asking them for things, and then you get a certain number of people who've already got their pets spayed and neutered, and now they can advocate for you, and you start seeing it grow without you having to do as much footwork. But you gotta stay at it for a while. And I would say for conversion rates, which is I guess what they usually call it, I would say 6 months to 9 months most of the time. And unfortunately, most of the time between that time, they probably had a litter of puppies or so. But look at it like this: even though they had that litter of puppies, you're still their friend, you still in the fight with them. But if you gave up, like got mad because they went ahead and had puppies anyway, you're not really getting in front of the problem. So yeah, and I would say once again, remember for most groups, try to find a proximate partner that may not even have animals. You want to find the people who are good with people. Find that person in the neighborhood that people like. They may not even have an animal, but you can, and usually it's easier for them to break through with people because they don't have an agenda. Their only agenda is to help you, and you're gonna compensate them, some kind of way. So that's really their agenda, and they already good with people. They already known in the neighborhood. So all you got to do is really just sit down with them sometimes and show them some of the talking points as it comes to um, allowing people to realize that spay and neuter is not a terrible thing, which just about everybody portrays it as a terrible thing in the neighborhood. It's always like you've taken something away from a dog, but they don't get a chance to see the end result. And
But you
that's
showed them the end result, right? Can you tell us a
yeah.
little bit more about that? You've taken people to shelters and what that experience was like.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. It becomes necessary at a certain point in time that they're able to connect the sheer number of pets that are about to be euthanized. And sometimes just saying that, or they see it on a piece of paper, like 2,000 dogs a month are euthanized, it just doesn't hit them. It just doesn't hit them. So what I used to, and me, I could tell when they were ready to take that trip down to a shelter. And sometimes I would do it in a group setting. Sometimes I'd have to do it just one on one. I learned my friends and I learned how to read them. So the first thing I have to concentrate on is this perception of love for dogs, because the perception of love is usually like if you love something, you want more and more and more of it, and you have to find a way to to try to help them understand that in this particular instance, that love is causing harm. And see, they just don't. They just. It's hard. It's hard for people to see that, and especially just through hearing it. Like, so I kind of soften them up and explain to them that I understand that you love them, but you also have to understand that through that love, you're creating 10 or 12 dogs at a time, and you're only placing or homing about four of them. So we got 6 to 8 pets that's going to end up at the shelter and be euthanized. And now, you're talking to a group of people who have dealt with this. You don't even have to question yourself about whether they've gone through this before or not. They may be desensitized to it and it may not be that big a deal to them, but they have dealt with it. So now that you're talking about it, it makes them remember seeing some of the puppies struggle. It makes them remember them having to struggle by trying to maintain 8 to 12 puppies while they're trying to sell them. I mean, these puppies grow, they eat, they tear up stuff, and most of our people live in apartments, so you got all kind of problems with people getting put out because they have too many pets. So it's a lot to that extent. So what I used to do, once I read that, especially an individual, once I read in their mind that they're ready to start really trying to make that confirmation as to how they perceive the love and making of more puppies, I go down to the animal shelter with them. And it's very important when I get down there that I control the narrative, because I have gone there with them and all they come out with is this, oh, I love pets feeling and I want that one. That's kind of cool because now you've opened them up to adoptions rather than breeding, but you haven't made them feel sorry for the pets that are going to be euthanized. And I hate to admit that, but they have to feel sorry. So you gotta don't let them get all happy inside the shelter. You gotta control the narrative that these beautiful pets who could, find a home are not able to find a home because we keep breeding. And always use we, not you, or let them know that we are all in this together. But and then sometimes, depending on the shelter, especially if you want to take a group down there together, it pays to have a person at the shelter, like a liaison, kind of walk with you. Now, when I did the private stuff, I wouldn't even tell the shelter that that's what I was coming for, because sometimes they get in your way. I just did that one-on-one with my friend or my client, however you want to look at it. And we had a private conversation. We would actually kind of sneak around the shelter, and I would talk to them about how many of these pets are going to be euthanized. Now, it's better if you do have a liaison at the shelter that can come. You bring a group, and particularly if you can get the kids to go. Me, I like to deal with the grown-ups a lot, but dealing with the kids, as we all know, is more beneficial because they're more open. So, you get the liaison from the shelter, you bring them down there, you talk to them about it, and you can actually get the euthanization numbers from the people at the shelter to show them as you go down the line how many of these dogs are not going to make it. So while we're all in there feeling cute about the dogs and doting over them, we it's important for whoever the presenters are to carry the message that most of these dogs won't make it out of here. And the answer to the solution to that problem lies within us and changing our perspective on how we love our dogs and cats. It's just not the kind of love where you want to create more. It's strange because it goes kind of against the laws of nature. I mean, most of the time when you love something, you naturally want more and more. So I did have to spend a lot of time trying to change that ideology about the love for them. And I watched people make the transition where they understood that by loving them meant preventing so many um, unwanted births to where they're actually being euthanized. It's crazy, and that's another thing that takes some time, and it means that they have to believe in you. They have to know you're not just trying to pull the wool over their eyes. You got to believe it, and then you got to take their time to make them understand that this is a different type of love. This is not the love where you want more and more of the object. This is the love where you want to control the numbers, and you have to be careful about the terminology too, because they don't like the word overpopulation. They start thinking about population control and things of that nature. So you got to be careful about how you word it, but they do have to understand that there are too many dogs, and the effects are obvious if somebody show you. If somebody show you that these, and sometimes if the shelter is cool, you can even take them to the euthanization chamber. I mean, you don't want to take them and let them watch a euthanization, but you can show them this is where it goes down so that they can start thinking about it and grasping like, oh, because we just don't want to think about those types of things. And if no one shows us, it just sounds like BS. And once they really see it, they can go home and start thinking about, okay, I'm going to stop thinking about breeding more because I love dogs. I'm going to protect these dogs by getting them spayed or neutered. And not to mention, the health benefits. And as they start to realize, the health benefits, and I talk a lot about dogs they may have lost, like running away, jumping the fence and never coming back. See, we take all of that like blase, blase. And I explain to them that 90% of that is because you had an unaltered pet. For your pet to live a nice, personal, comfortable life, we've got to deal with some of these issues because they're going to go out chasing a smell and they get hit by a car. And most of them have related to that. They know they've lost dogs. They say, yeah, he was out there, look, chasing tail, as we call it, and got hit. Well, one of the best ways to prevent that is to go ahead and spay and neuter the pet. So yeah, I think it's really huge, especially if you can partner with the shelter. But if you have to kind of just sneak in there, depending on what kind of shelter you got. If you got to kind of sneak in there with somebody, act like you visiting to see if they might want to adopt, but really you there to show them that these adorable pets will not make it out of here if we as society continue to breed like this.
We're going to get into the Q&A session now. That was a lot. I'm going to make a reckless promise, and I didn't even ask Tim permission, but I'm just going to say it and hope he doesn't get mad. Tim, there's so many questions. We're not gonna get through it today. Let's do as many as we can. And then maybe you and I can record a second session and distribute it to answer whatever we don't answer. Is that okay? Okay, you're muted, so unmute yourself and I'm just gonna give you the questions in the order that,
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's fine,
and-
Chetna. Thank you.
all right. Tim, you were talking about this idea of like people want dogs that look tough. Is the dog being intact part of the dog looking tough?
No, it's not. But of course, I know a lot of you guys have run up on this. The perception of a dog without his testicles is related in our neighborhoods to a man who doesn't have cojones. So that is a challenge to get them to realize that that your being a man or a male is not really related to your genitals, and you just have to try to work your way through that. But that does come up. But I've woven out ways to deal with it, but it will come up. And as we go through these processes, I'll be able to show people more ways to breach that subject. But it's a tough one.
There's another question, Tim. What do you think, since pit bulls are kind of a challenge in a lot of shelters? One of the questions is, what do you think about mandatory spay neuter ordinances for pit bulls? So you have to spay and neuter your pit bulls. How do you think the community would receive that? And how effective do you think it would be?
All right, so I have to look at that from two different standpoints. From one standpoint, I really would agree to some mandatory type of situations. I know, from a social standpoint, most people in the neighborhood would not feel good about that. Of course, they feel like they got enough people making them do things that they don't want to do. But once again, from what I've seen and what I realize about the effects of the breeding and overbreeding, if we get more people to understand that, I think we could also get them to go along with some type of mandatory spay and neuter situation. I mean, that's a tough one, but my personal opinion, I would I would like to see the way the legislation or whatever it is crafted, but the idea in itself, I think is on the table. Yeah.
So one of the things that you talked about is we can't do this work without people like you. There has to be someone from within the community who's respected, who's good with people, that we connect with, that we compensate, and who can do this work. But how do you find those people? How do you determine who the respected neighborhood personalities are, and how do you connect with them?
The best way to do it these days now, before COVID, you could actually take your chances and just knock door to door and tell them who you are, what you do, what you want. Okay, so after COVID, I found that the best way to do it is to have events, go to some of the local schools, maybe the church. I'm not so big on religious organizations, but go to the schools and talk to the teachers and see what kids have pets and who may need services. So having events is probably the number one way to draw people to you now. And it doesn't matter what kind of event it is. It doesn't have to be animal related. Just say you have a party in the park one day and you pass, just tell everybody to come. They don't have to be a pet owner, but doing that and also collaborating, being close and friendly with some of the local schools and educators, and having proximate partners. Once you find a couple, it goes pretty fast. Sometimes it may be a little hard to find at first, but it goes pretty fast once you overcome getting about two of them.
I'm going to ask more questions that are in the chat, but in the meantime, if people want to raise their hand, if they want to ask a question themselves, feel free to raise your hand or just chime in. So Tim, you mentioned that a lot of animal advocates will do anything for animals, but not so much for, get this question, they'll do anything in their power to improve the dog's well-being while neglecting families and communities that are caring for those animals. What are the ways you have found to connect animal advocates to the needs of human well-being? How do you get animal people to care about people?
Yeah. Sometimes you don't. That's where the proximate leaders come in. I always look at it like it's never warfare between animal welfare people or people who care so much about animals and don't particularly care that much about people, and nor is it the other way around. But when you look at it holistically, like you're not taking away from anything, you're adding. So I say work together. If people want to go directly at the pet, maybe that's okay, but we also have to have other people who are concerned about the family. I think when those two people work together and come together, a lot more happens. I know more happens rather than us just fighting. But besides fighting, sometimes it just becomes adversarial. And I would promote each of us. I'm always trying to be understanding and add instead of subtract from things. So I don't want to say, no, you cannot do it this way. I want to say to you that yes, the way you do it has its certain effectiveness, but we also need another layer. And that other layer is to have liaisons that are friendly with the families. And then when you guys are working together, you see how far you can really go. And a lot of it's personality based. So you may not ever really change their personality, but you introduce to them a way where we can better coalesce together and get the ultimate outcome that we both want.
That's great. So what, and by the way, if I'm missing anyone's hand, just scream at me. I think I'm watching, but I might be missing something. But there's another question in the chat. What are the best ways to distribute mass information or kind of like mass education about responsible ownership and the best ways to manage companion pets in the communities that you work with and others like it at a larger scale in a way that doesn't take away the community's agency?
All right. Well, on a larger scale, and I do understand that, but the way that I work and the way that's most effective is right inside my city, right on my block. That's kind of the effectiveness of having approximate leaders. But on a larger scale, I guess there's like legislation, um, social media, of course, it is one way, but really just trying to do it from your neighborhood inside out and let it spread. Sometimes when you start outside of the neighborhood, you miss components within your neighborhood, and that kind of gets in your way later on. So that's kind of a question that's not so much in my expertise because that would be like mass media or whatever. And I think where my expertise really falls in is in the nuances and the details of dealing with inside the urban cities and dealing with the people that I communicate with the best.
Right.
But I appreciate the question.
And Tim, someone else is asking, so they work at a shelter or a rescue, I think, and they said they're discussing inner city access and acceptance at animal shelters. And how do you how do you like help people know more about the shelter or come to the shelter? What are some things that they can do? So one person says, transportation. Would it be safe if our city's public transportation was made pit bull friendly, animal friendly? Like, is that a solution? Like, how do you get more people from the community to go to the shelter and to be able to access a shelter and its resources?
Yeah, that's a good question. And first is to get them knowledgeable of the shelter and feeling good about it. Back in the days we all called it the dog pound, and this was like the prison for dogs. So traditionally we didn't look at it as a friendly place where you could adopt, where you could do things of that nature. It was almost like punishment. So we worked on transitioning them to realize that the shelters are both necessary. Yes, they do have a tough job to do, but they're necessary and they're friendly people who would like to help, you know, the majority of the time. So transportation is always an issue. And depending on where you live, you may have pet friendly transportation systems. Here in Atlanta, the MARTA system is not pet friendly. But I tell you what they have here that's been working pretty good for people. They have pet friendly ride share services now. So every now and then I may have to pay a ride share person to pick up one of my clients and maybe take them to the vet or take them down to the shelter because they're willing to adopt, you know. So that's an avenue that has helped a lot. And depending on your budget, it always helps, you know, to have you a SUV if you got a decent car, and that means you're gonna make a lot of runs back and forth helping people, but you're gonna make a lot of friends. So you know, if you're in this animal welfare world like this, don't get you a fancy BMW, get you a SUV so you can so you can throw some dogs and some people up in and and do what you got to do. So, yeah, good question. Now.
All right, Tim, we're at the end, so I'm going to end it on Janelle's question, which I can't give you time to answer, but she just wants to know why you're so awesome. Like, have you always just been this awesome? So I'll let you
Thank
connect
you,
with
Janelle.
Janelle.
Thank you for everybody. Yeah.
But I also want to thank you for being here. We'll definitely find ways to follow up. To everyone on the call, you will get a follow-up email. I'll connect with Tim and see if we can get a few more questions answered from the chat. You'll also get the recording from this webinar, including the questions in the follow-up email. And you'll also get the registration link for the next Life of Riley webinar, which is on September 26th, and which is also about dog breeding, also about connecting with communities who breed dogs, but a different community. So I hope you'll join us then. Thank you again, Tim. You really are awesome. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for your time. And thank you everyone for being part of our community today. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.